Welcome to the Big Four Accounting Firms podcast, brought to you by big4accountingfirms.com. We have a great show today, but before we get to that, I wanted to remind you of a few things. We have 2 great books on Amazon that will help you get the Big Four job that you deserve, and I've included links to those books in the show notes. Additionally, I wanted to remind everyone to make sure that they subscribe to this podcast to stay up to date on the latest Big Four news and career tips. Also, make sure to share the show with a friend if you get a chance. Lastly, follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. I'll include links to all our social media in the show notes. Thanks and enjoy the show. Thanks for dialing the Big Four Networks. You will be joined to your conference call soon. Since we've had financial report releases from 2 out of the Big Four accounting firms, I wanted to try something different today. And I wanted to try to predict what the remaining 2 accounting firms will release in terms of revenue and people. So the 2 firms that have already released information are Ernst & Young and Deloitte. And I'll include links to the prior podcast where we covered those press releases in the show notes so that you can get the details. The 2 firms left to report are PwC and KPMG. First, let's recap the releases from Deloitte and EY. Deloitte announced revenues of $38.8 billion. And Ernst & Young announced revenues of $31.4 billion. And that is a 6% revenue growth for Ernst & Young and a 5.4% increase for Deloitte. As you can see, they are both right around the 5 to 6% increase in revenue growth. So let's see if we can extrapolate that to PwC and KPMG. But before we do, let's see how the Big Four compared to each other last year in terms of revenue growth. Were they all in the same range or were they wildly different? In 2016, Deloitte had revenue growth of about 4.5%. PwC had revenue growth of 1.5%. KPMG had revenue growth of about 4%, with E&Y coming in at about 3.1%. So as you can see, the revenue growth in percentage terms in 2016 across all the Big Four was roughly in the same range. It ranged from 1.5% to 4.5% in revenue growth. This just goes to show that the Big Four usually mirror each other because they all do the same things and they all mimic each other and steal each other's ideas. And the main differences this year between Big Four firms is that PwC had terrible legal troubles with Taylor Bean, MF Global, and other controversial lawsuits. The upside is that they acquired the GE tax department. And another thing that could make a difference is that Deloitte acquired a lot of marketing agencies this year. But that really isn't contributing to their revenue just yet. That is more of an investment for the future. So let's try our estimate out. We will remind you that Deloitte and EY had revenue growth in the 5 to 6% range. So let's apply a 5% growth rate to PwC since they are larger, and a 6% growth rate to KPMG since they are smaller. If you apply a 5% growth rate to PwC's 2016 revenues, which were $35.9 billion, you get projected revenues for 2017 of about $37.7 billion. And that is a pretty good number, but it would still leave them in number 2 in the world in revenues behind Deloitte. So you heard it here first, folks. PwC will have revenues of $37.7 billion according to our estimates. And there are obviously a number of things that could affect this, like we said before. There's a lot of bad news that came out about PwC. They screwed up the Oscars, and they also had tons of lawsuits that damaged their brand. So you'll have to wait and see if any of that had an impact on their revenues. Next up, let's estimate KPMG's revenues. We wanted to take a break today to tell you about today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is Right Networks. Right Networks gets your current accounting-based and legacy applications into the cloud, so it's easier and more secure to share sensitive documents and data with your clients. This new flexibility allows you to cost-effectively grow your business and even reach new geographies. We know your reputation is on the line, so go with the solution that is backed by Intuit. To learn more, give Right Networks a call at 888-417-4448, extension 1. That's 888-417-4448, extension 1. Now back to the show. Remember that we'll try to estimate the revenue by applying a 6% growth rate to their 2016 numbers. And if you apply a 6% revenue growth rate to their 2016 revenues of $25.42 billion, you get revenues for 2017 of about $27 billion. This would leave them as the last Big Four accounting firm to be below $30 billion in revenue, now that E&Y has broken into the $30 billion club by making $31.4 billion in 2017. Now that we have estimated the revenues for KPMG and PwC, let's try to estimate the increase in the number of employees for both PwC and KPMG by looking at Deloitte and E&Y's employee growth and trying to extrapolate that to PwC and KPMG. Deloitte grew their number of employees to 263,900 in 2017. That represents a growth rate of 8% from their 2016 employees of 244,400. Now let's turn to E&Y. Ernst & Young grew their workforce to 247,000 employees in 2017, and this is up from 230,000 employees in 2016. This represents a growth rate of 7.2%. And let's take a look at the growth rates for all Big Four in prior year to see if applying a growth rate of 7 to 8% is reasonable. Because as we just went over, Deloitte and EY's employee revenue growth rate this year is 7 to 8%. In 2016, the employee growth rate for each firm was as follows. Deloitte had employee growth rate of 8.6%, while E&Y had 8.9%. PwC had an employee growth rate of 7.4%, and KPMG had a growth rate of 8.6%. So it does seem reasonable to apply an 7 to 8% growth rate to both KPMG and PwC. If we apply an 8% employee growth rate to KPMG's 2016 employees of 188,982, we get their estimated 2017 employee number of 204,000 individuals. And this is a good increase for KPMG, but it still leaves them way behind the other Big Four. Okay, now let's move on to PwC's employees. If we apply an 8% growth rate to PwC's 2016 employee number of 223,468, we get their estimated 2017 employee number of about 241,000 individuals. This puts PwC behind E&Y in number of employees, as E&Y has 247,570. This makes PwC the third largest accounting firm in the world in terms of employees. And this leaves Deloitte holding on to the number one spot in number of employees with 263,900. Well, there you have it, folks. That's our estimate of revenue and employees for the two remaining accounting firms left to report their numbers. So let's go through the numbers again. We estimated revenues of $37.7 billion for PwC, with PwC employees of 241,000. For KPMG, we estimated revenues of $27 billion on 204,000 employees. To find out whether those numbers actually pan out for KPMG and PwC, you should subscribe to this podcast and visit our website at big4accountingfirms.com. We're also trying to grow our business so that we can bring you the best Big Four content. So if you could share this podcast with a friend and also give us a review on iTunes, that would be greatly appreciated. And you would help us in providing you with the best Big Four content. That's all we have for today. Thanks for listening. You are now leaving the Big Four networks. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast, share it with a friend, and visit big4accountingfirms.com. Thanks for joining today's call.